It's almost hard to remember a time before social media, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
From those kind of clunky early sites just trying to reconnect us with old classmates, it's sort of turned into this incredibly powerful force. It touches almost everything, even, something as specialized as vascular surgery.
Absolutely. It represents a real uh, big change in how information gets out there and how
Yeah.
professionals connect with each other and with the public, too.
And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We've been looking at some really interesting chapters from Rutherford's vascular surgery and endovascular
Not
therapy.
gendered, yeah.
Right, a real cornerstone text. We want to understand how social media is being used and maybe some of the surprising things that come with it in this very specific field.
Rutherford gives us that solid baseline, the established practice.
Yeah.
So looking at how social media fits in, it gives us a glimpse into where things are going.
Because let's face it, you've probably typed a medical symptom into Google at some point, right?
Oh, for sure. Who hasn't?
So we're exploring how even these highly specialized surgeons are navigating that same digital world. What tools are they using? What are the real upsides? And maybe even more importantly, what are the sort of red flags they need to watch out for?
Exactly.
Our goal today is really to unpack the role of social media in vascular surgery, the good, the maybe less good, and the guidelines that are starting to pop up.
Right. We'll look at specific platforms, how they're being used in this specialty, and the practical stuff, the ethical stuff that comes up when medicine meets this digital world.
Okay, so social media is just everywhere now. But to really get its current impact, maybe we should make a quick step back. Like, how did this whole thing even start? Where did it come from?
Well, if we look back, the initial sparks were really late 90s, platforms like Classmates, 6 Degrees.
Oh, yeah, I vaguely remember those.
They were really focused on that basic idea, just connecting people you already knew,
Hmm?
sort of. Then the early 2000s brought Friendster, MySpace, widening the net a bit.
Yeah.
But the landscape we really know today, that really kicked off with Facebook in 2004.
Right, Facebook, it feels like it's just always been there now.
Yeah.
And now it's just one piece of a much bigger puzzle.
Precisely. Since then, we've seen this incredible explosion of platforms, right? Each finding its own little niche, sharing photos, short videos, long blogs, collaborating on info.
And the numbers are just huge, aren't they?
They're pretty amazing. Over 70% of adults in America are using at least one social media platform.
Wow. That's a lot of scrolling. And I guess the younger generations are the ones really driving that.
They are. You look at the Pew Research data. It consistently shows that 18 to 29-year-old group with the highest use. And it's not just people anymore. Businesses, professional groups, schools, they've all jumped on board. They see the power for getting their message out.
Which brings us right back to vascular surgery. What's pushing this specific field towards social media? Is there something unique there?
Well, what's interesting is that vascular surgery has, historically been pretty quick to pick up new technologies. Think about endovascular techniques, those minimally invasive procedures, right? Inside blood vessels, often guided by imaging. The field's often been on the cutting edge there.
Right, like stents and things.
Exactly. So in that context, maybe embracing social media is a natural next step. Part of that innovative culture, we're definitely seeing more individual surgeons, clinics, even training programs setting up shop online.
And it's not just the individual doctors, right? The big professional organizations are involved too.
Exactly. The Society for Vascular Surgery, SVS, a major leader, they've got accounts on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, alongside their regular website, of course. And other societies, regional ones, national ones, they're doing the same. We're still figuring out the exact impact within vascular surgery. The research is ongoing. But it seems pretty clear that ignoring this powerful communication tool, that could mean missing out on some big opportunities for connection, for sharing info.
Okay, so we've established social media is a major player and vascular surgery is getting more involved. Let's dive into the specifics now. These different platforms, what unique roles do they play here? Maybe start with the giant, Facebook.
Okay, Facebook. At its core, it's still about building relationships, building communities online. It started with college kids. Now it's this massive global thing. For vascular surgery, what's really interesting is its ability to host groups based on common interests.
Like patient groups.
Exactly. Think about patient support groups for specific vascular conditions. These Facebook groups have become surprisingly powerful. For patients with rare conditions, sometimes it's a lifeline. They connect with others who really get it.
I can see that. It could feel pretty isolating otherwise.
Totally. And we've seen cases where patients share really crucial tips, managing symptoms, or even finding out about new clinical trials maybe their local doctor didn't even know about yet.
Wow. So real practical benefits.
Definitely. And then from the other side, for a clinic or a hospital, Facebook has these really sophisticated targeted ads. So it can be a pretty effective way to, build their brand, market their services to specific groups who might need their help.
All right, let's switch gears. Twitter, the land of the short, sharp thought. How's that being used?
Twitter, yeah, the microblogging thing. It's great for getting information out fast,
Ah,
short bursts. We've seen a definite uptick in vascular surgery stuff on Twitter since around 2015.
okay.
You've got everyone involved, med students, residents, practicing surgeons, societies, journals. The hashtag system is really key there, right? Helps people find relevant stuff, connect with others interested in the same things.
But Twitter, well, it also has a bit of a reputation, doesn't it, for maybe the less positive side of online interaction.
It does. That openness, well, great for broad communication, also makes it vulnerable. Things like cyberbullying and definitely the rapid spread of misinformation. Anyone can pretty much comment on anything, and there's not always rigorous fact-checking going on.
Yeah, that's a worry.
But there are positives, too. Like there was one study, actually, that showed using gamified Twitter questions for surgical residents, it actually led to better scores on their big in-training exam, the ABSITE.
Really? How did that work?
Seems like the daily quick questions, the fast feedback loop, maybe the discussion it sparked, it just helped reinforce the learning somehow.
Interesting. So those little bites of info can actually spur deeper learning. Okay, what about the visual side? That leads us to something like YouTube, right?
Exactly. YouTube is all about video, and it has huge potential as an educational tool in vascular surgery. Surgeons can post procedure recordings, share info about diseases, resources. They can reach patients, trainees, the general public. People subscribe, like, comment, share. It's very interactive.
But I'm guessing, like the others, there are potential pitfalls there, too.
There are. Just like Twitter, YouTube's openness means misinformation can, unfortunately, spread easily. Studies looking at health info on YouTube for various things have found, well, sometimes substandard or even misleading content. And what's kind of interesting in our field is, even though visual learning is obviously huge for surgery, vascular surgery actually has a relatively limited presence on YouTube compared to other surgical areas. At least when you look at common procedures like, say, carotid endarterectomy or getting access to the femoral artery.
That's surprising. You'd think surgeons would be all over using video to show techniques.
You would think so. It really points to a gap, an opportunity. There's a need for more high-quality, accurate vascular surgery video content out there.
Okay, shifting to another visual one, Instagram. How does that fit in?
Instagram, yeah. Photos, short videos, it really suits visually rich stuff. So in vascular surgery, maybe showing interesting parts of techniques or key findings on imaging, like cool details on an X-ray or MRI.
Makes sense.
And it's also really powerful for branding, for marketing, especially for clinics wanting to create a strong visual identity, connect with a certain aesthetic.
Kind of like how you see before and afters in plastic surgery.
Exactly like that. Now, vascular surgery might not focus on aesthetics in the same way, but the visual side of some conditions, some procedures, that can still be communicated really effectively and grab people's attention on Instagram.
What about the more direct, maybe behind-the-scenes chat, things like WhatsApp?
WhatsApp, yeah, instant messaging. It makes direct communication easy between individuals or in groups. Medically, you could see it being used for quick coordination for surgical teams, maybe even some patient follow-up in specific cases. But always keeping privacy rules front and center. That's crucial.
Absolutely. And then there are the more strictly professional networking sites. LinkedIn, Doximity, ResearchGate.
Right, those are specifically for professional use. LinkedIn is mostly career stuff, jobs, industry contacts. Doximity is tailored just for the medical community, doctors, other healthcare pros connecting, maybe discussing cases, staying updated on news. And ResearchGate is really for researchers sharing findings, collaborating, finding papers. Vascular surgeons use these for, career moves, asking colleagues for opinions, keeping up with the latest research.
And rounding it out, what about things like Wikipedia or medical blogs?
Wikipedia, yeah, the big online encyclopedia. It's often the first place patients go, sometimes even doctors, for quick info on almost anything medical. Medical blogs are more informal doctors sharing opinions, talking about new developments, insights from their own experience.
But accuracy can be an issue there, too.
It can. Wikipedia tries for neutrality with its community editing, but the info on both can really vary. You definitely need to approach them with a critical eye.
So, quite a mix of tools, each with its own strengths, its own potential weaknesses when you apply it to vascular surgery. Okay, let's talk about the specific ways surgeons are actually using these platforms. Surgical education feels like a big one.
It is, definitely. The current generation of trainees, millennials mostly, they grew up completely digital. They just have different expectations for how they get and process information. There's this learning theory, connectivism, that talks about networking, sharing info across different places, finding patterns. Digital platforms are perfect for that.
So, just relying on the old textbook isn't really cutting it anymore.
Not completely. I mean, the foundational texts are still vital, absolutely. But digital platforms, online journals, social media, many trainees actually prefer these now. Surgical educators are catching on, realizing this shift, and they're actively looking at how social media can be a useful addition to traditional teaching.
Right, like that Twitter study you mentioned.
Exactly. The daily questions, the interaction, the discussion it sparked, that seemed really effective.
And I can imagine, experienced surgeons sharing interesting cases online, maybe tricky ones, and then you get discussions in the comments. That must be a great learning tool for trainees.
Oh, absolutely. The different viewpoints, the shared knowledge in those online chats can be incredibly valuable for everyone. And beyond Twitter, you've got podcasts, blogs, YouTube, even wikis people edit together. They're all being explored for education and medicine. Surgical videos, especially, are super popular with trainees. YouTube is often the first place they look because it's easy to access and there's just so much content.
But we mentioned earlier, vascular surgery isn't huge on YouTube yet.
Exactly. And that's a real opportunity. Creating and sharing good, high-quality, technically accurate videos of vascular procedures. That's really important for training the next generation properly.
What about the patients? How are they using social media when it comes to vascular surgery or just their health in general?
Patients are definitely turning more and more to the internet and social media. It's often their primary source for info about conditions, treatments. They also look for online communities, for support from others going through the same thing. And even to connect with doctors sometimes, those Facebook support groups we talked about. Studies show they can actually have a really positive impact on how satisfied patients feel with their care. Other platforms can help lower anxiety by giving clear info, helping patients understand their condition better.
And it's not just reading stuff, is it? Are patients using these platforms to actually talk to their doctors?
That's right. Research shows a growing trend there, using social media for health communication, especially with younger people. But, and this is the challenge, this easy access to tons of information. Patients often don't have the medical background to really judge if what they're reading is accurate or reliable.
Yeah, that's definitely a big concern. You can find almost any claim online, whether it's backed by evidence or not.
Precisely. Social media is mostly unmoderated, right? It doesn't have that strict peer review process like scientific journals.
Yeah.
So misinformation can, unfortunately, spread like wildfire. Studies that have looked at the quality of health info online for specific diseases, they often find serious problems.
Like what?
Well, for instance, one study looked at YouTube videos about varicose vein treatments. It found a lot of them were pretty poor quality, information-wise, scientifically speaking, and often they'd push one specific treatment without giving a balanced view.
So what's the solution then? Just tell patients, don't go online.
That's just not realistic anymore, is it? I think the better approach is to guide patients towards good, reliable online resources. Vascular surgery societies, major medical centers, they have a responsibility here. They need to create and actively push out high-quality, evidence-based info about common vascular diseases using various platforms. And individual surgeons should also be proactive. Point their patients towards these trustworthy sources during appointments.
That makes sense. Doctors can't just ignore where patients get info. They need to be part of that conversation online. Okay, let's shift focus a bit. How are surgeons using social media for themselves, for their own careers, their practices?
Self-promotion, marketing, building their practice. Yeah, those are definitely big ways surgeons are using social media.
Yeah.
Plastic surgery has really led the charge here, probably because their work is so visual.
Right.
We're still seeing specific data emerge for vascular surgery, but we can learn a lot from what other fields are doing.
Like what? Does having a good social media presence actually bring in more patients?
Well, the early data suggests that the return on investment from platforms like Facebook and Instagram, the visual ones, can be pretty good. Sometimes maybe even better than traditional ads, especially if you have a newer practice. It might also be better than other types of online marketing. It's tricky to put an exact dollar figure on it, but building a strong, recognizable online brand, that's definitely valuable. And it can be especially useful for marketing treatments for less common conditions, because patients looking for info on those often form online groups.
That's interesting. So patients with rare vascular issues might actually find specialists through these online networks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was one analysis of referral patterns for some rare conditions. It actually showed an increase in referrals coming not from other doctors, but directly from people's internet searches and social media activity. So building that online brand successfully means, clearly showing what your practice values are, giving good info about the doctors, the services, and creating stuff your target audience actually finds interesting. Choosing the right platforms for your content and who you're trying to reach is key too. And even little things matter, like your account name, your profile info.
Okay, beyond just getting new patients, what about connecting with other surgeons? Collaboration.
Collaboration on tough patient cases, working together on research, that's another really valuable use. Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and those research sites like ResearchGate, they create these virtual spaces for networking. Surgeons can easily share tricky case details, get opinions from colleagues, literally anywhere in the world, bounce research ideas off each other, find collaborators. Social media, especially Twitter, has also become huge at academic conferences. People discuss presentations live, keep the conversation going online long after the meeting ends. And it can be useful for spreading the word about clinical trials, maybe recruiting patients that way too.
So it really broadens the professional network way beyond just face-to-face meetings. What about attracting the next generation? Recruitment, that must be a factor.
Absolutely. We're talking about medical students and residents now who are mostly digital natives, right? Millennials, Gen Z. They rely heavily on social media and online stuff when they're exploring careers and training programs.
Yeah.
So having a strong social media presence, it's becoming pretty much essential for outreach and recruitment.
But you mentioned earlier that maybe vascular surgery programs are lagging a bit.
Yeah, current research suggests that's the case. A study back in 2018 found only a pretty small percentage of U.S. vascular surgery training programs actually had dedicated social media accounts.
Really? You'd think they'd be all over it to attract the best
You would
candidates.
think. Most programs have websites, sure, but sometimes that info is a bit static, doesn't offer that dynamic feel you get from social media. Social media gives potential applicants another way to find a program, get a feel for its culture, see what's going on through more casual updates.
Right.
But, and this is important, all that social media stuff needs to clearly point people back to the official program website for the full details, how to apply, all that. And social media can also help just attract students to the specialty itself by showing off the cool, important work vascular surgeons do, maybe through online resources or webinars.
So it's promoting specific programs, but also boosting the image of the whole field. Okay, we've hit a lot of the potential upsides. Let's talk about the downsides. What are the big risks, the concerns with using social media in vascular surgery?
This is really, really important to talk about. Privacy, first and foremost. The potential for HIPAA violations is huge. Surgical patients are especially vulnerable, and there's a serious risk their personal health information could get shared without consent. Photos, videos, even details that seem anonymous.
Yeah.
There was a study at one academic medical center. It found a worrying number of med students, residents, even faculty admitted they had shared patient health info on social media.
That's alarming. It's so easy to just snap a quick picture, maybe not thinking through the privacy implications fully.
Exactly. Keeping patient confidentiality absolutely sacred, following every part of HIPAA rules about protected health information, PHI. That has to be the #1 priority. Obvious things like names, birthdays, record numbers, sure, but also other details that could potentially identify someone. Even if you think you've de-identified information, like for a presentation, you need the same caution on social media. Because sometimes, even a few seemingly harmless details, maybe with a picture or video, can be pieced together. Plus, most hospitals have their own strict rules about social media posts involving patients or clinical stuff. You have to know those too.
Okay, privacy is huge. What about misinformation? We touched on it, but it seems especially dangerous in medicine.
It is. Absolutely. Social media platforms generally lack that rigorous peer review process that's fundamental to reliable medical information. Pretty much anyone can post something, maybe seem authoritative just because they get likes or shares, regardless of their actual expertise or if the info is even correct.
Right.
And research has shown false news can actually spread way faster and wider than true information on platforms like Twitter. So this puts a real responsibility on doctors who are active online. They need to engage in what you might call social correction, respectfully pointing out false claims, guiding people towards trustworthy sources, and have to be super careful not to give individual medical advice online. A general comment meant for one person can easily be misunderstood or spread way out of context.
What about the doctor's own image, their professional reputation? Can social media hurt that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As doctors, vascular surgeons are expected to maintain professional standards in everything they do, and that includes online. Now, exactly what counts as unprofessional online can sometimes be debated, but there's always a risk a post could be seen negatively by patients, colleagues, employers. Surgeons really need to assume anything they post online is essentially public. Potential patients, current patients, they might well look you up online to decide if they trust you. Even one post you didn't think through could damage your personal reputation,
Yeah.
and maybe even your hospital's reputation. The basic rule, if you wouldn't want a patient or colleague to see it, even with privacy settings, you probably shouldn't post it.
It's like the modern version of think before you speak. Now it's definitely think very hard before you post. Okay, what about hiring? Like for residency spots. Are program directors actually looking at applicants' social media?
Yes, unfortunately, it seems like they are. Studies show a fair number of residency program directors admit they check out applicants' social media profiles during the review process. And many said what they found did influence how they ranked candidates.
Wow.
The idea might be to get a fuller picture of the person or maybe spot red flags, but it definitely raises some big questions about fairness and privacy.
And then there's just the nasty side of the internet, dealing with cyberbullies, trolls.
Sadly, yeah. Running into trolls, people who just post nasty stuff to get a reaction, it's almost inevitable if you're active online, and that includes doctors. Surgeons need to be really careful about engaging directly with them. It often just makes things worse, spreads misinformation, and can even hurt their own reputation.
Sure.
Recognizing troll behavior quickly and taking action, deleting comments, blocking users, reporting accounts, that's really the best approach.
Okay, one last potential issue. Intellectual property. If a surgeon shares, say, a new technique online, could someone else just take it?
That is a potential risk, yeah. Social media platforms have terms of service about copyright and IP, but actually enforcing them can be tough. And the platforms often give themselves pretty broad rights to use whatever you post. So when sharing stuff online, especially new ideas or techniques, surgeons should probably just assume it's basically public knowledge. While IP laws might offer some protection, actually pursuing it legally can be complicated and expensive. Anyone sharing an idea needs to realize others might pick it up or build on it.
Okay, definitely a lot of potential minefields there. Let's switch to some practical advice now. What are some key do's and don'ts for vascular surgeons using social media, and maybe what's relevant for us as patients interacting online?
Okay, for surgeons, a fundamental DO. Really get to know the platforms you decide to use. If it feels overwhelming, maybe get some help, find some resources. Do link your professional accounts to your practice website, other professional profiles, and back again. Create that clear online professional identity. Do seriously think about keeping personal and professional accounts separate. And definitely don't link them in a way that blurs the lines.
Good point.
Also essential. Do always follow your hospital or institution's social media rules. Do recognize and embrace the value social media can have for medical education for yourself and for trainees. Do use relevant hashtags. They help people find your posts, connect you to wider conversations. Do figure out who your audience is and what you want to achieve with social media.
Yeah.
DO, try to post regularly, but don't flood people. Maybe once a week to once a day is a good range. And a really important don't for training programs. Don't use social media to screen or vet residency or fellowship applicants.
Those all sound like solid practical tips. What about the absolute don'ts, the really critical ones?
Top of the list. Don't ever use social media for telemedicine. You can give general info, answer broad questions, sure, but never give individual medical advice or try to diagnose someone online. Always point people to an actual office visit or resources to find a local doctor. And the biggest, don't. Never, under any circumstances, share identifiable patient information. That's a major HIPAA violation, huge legal and ethical trouble. Be super careful with any patient details, even ones that seem okay. And finally, don't ever try to deceive people with inaccurate information or by, exaggerating results of treatments.
So the bottom line really comes down to professionalism, ethics, and always putting patient privacy and well-being first, even online.
Exactly right. That's the core of it.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into this increasingly connected world of social media and vascular surgery. It's pretty clear it's a powerful toolkit, lots of potential benefits, but it absolutely demands a very careful, responsible, and ethically aware approach.
Absolutely. The chances to improve education, engage better with patients, collaborate more effectively with colleagues, they're huge. But you always have to balance that with being really aware of the risks and those critical ethical lines.
So maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to think about. Given how much social media is part of medicine now, what responsibility do we have as patients, as the public, in checking the health information we find online? And how should we engage with doctors in this digital space? It's definitely something worth chewing on as we all try to figure out this digital age.
That's a vital question. It really highlights that we all share a responsibility in making sure these powerful tools are used accurately and ethically.
And that brings us to the end of this deep dive.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us.